Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our transit series. And I'm here this week with Brandon once again of Bramstrology. Welcome, Brandon. Today we're talking about Pluto's journey through the first house.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. This is always so fun. I love chatting with you, B.
Yeah, so you are almost completely done this transit. You just have like a couple more weeks as we sit recording when Pluto's at the 29th degree. So this is a
Mhm.
long 16-year transit. Started for you back in 2008.
Mhm.
What do you think has been the biggest takeaway of this transit?
That is that is
It's a little
a
question.
very large question. I think the biggest takeaway for me, and I know it's very simple to just say empowerment, but it really is that. I think there's been so much that I have been able to quite literally destroy within my own psyche and then rebuild in a much more empowered way, and in a very plutonic extreme way as well. So I'll probably go into sharing that a little bit here, um, as we kind of go into it. But yeah, a lot about that. I've had surgeries. I've had a lot of empowerment things. I've had these like empowerment disempowerment kind of cycles. But I've ultimately really gained a true understanding of what I'm here to do through this cycle. And it's been very interesting relation with my body as well. A lot of different sorts of cycles within that, and very deep differences about that reclamation of that self-worth and self-image, which is typical for the first house. So yeah, I don't know how much you want me to go into that in the front end, but we'll get into that
Well,
more.
I think that's a great segue to start with some footnotes to people who are very new to astrology, just to talk a little bit about what Pluto is, and then the first house. And then we're really going to dive into the technicalities for people who have a deeper understanding of astrology and also for our newbies as well. So let's just do a little house cleaning first. You're an evolutionary astrologer. So I'm really curious, what is the evolutionary astrology take on Pluto? I've read Jeffrey Wolf Green's book, which I think is amazing. It's a great resource. And also, do you have any other resources from an evolutionary standpoint that you would also suggest?
Yeah, I think so. As it relates to kind of, well, I'll get the resource out of the way first. Obviously, that Pluto book, I have it right here, so it's a very great book. Jeff Green, this is a staple for any evolutionary astrologer, anyone that wants to really learn about that perspective. I really love Jeffrey Wolf Green's work, as well as Mark Jones is a really great evolutionary astrologer that I really work with quite deeply. He works a lot more on like a psychological level as well, so he has a lot of great resources. There is a lot of different studies, like different leaders in the industry. It's mainly the ones that I mainly follow, like I said, are Jeffrey Wolf Green. Obviously, he's like the staple, as well as Mark Jones. There are some things with Stephen Forrest that also goes into that as well a little bit. He kind of ventures into those areas. Um, and so those are the main resources I would really recommend. And then also to Astrology for the Soul by Jan Spiller is a great book that works on the nodes. It's not specifically from like an evolutionary perspective and that whole philosophical bend, but it is a really great resources if you're getting started in the nodes. And I think it's a lot of astrologers kind of begin with that book as they venture into the nodal conversation. So those are the resources. Um, and then as for the kind of Pluto first house story, a lot of it's really different based on the natal chart versus a transit, obviously. Because with the transit, you're going to want to see, what it may be hitting in the chart, obviously what sign it's in. So we're going to more than likely be talking about Pluto and Aquarius in the first house during the course of this particular video. Um, but a lot of Pluto the first house journey is a lot about really embodying as much of your soul as possible and really allowing yourself to really be your own person and really go through and really self-actualize yourself as much as you can and really believe in your willpower, because the first house is all about the willpower. It's all about how you go after your goals, how you utilize your own energy, your own will. And when you have Pluto there, it's the soul's trying to find a way to purify that process. And so it's going to kind of get all the toxic kind of impulses or the toxic views of yourself kind of out of the way so that your soul can really, like I said, like be fully embodied. I think that's why a lot of people that have natal Scorpio risings or Pluto in the first, they kind of have this very intense demeanor because they're really trying to bring so much of themselves into their body. And that can be a little overwhelming. So that's kind of just a little overview of that I would really say. Um, yeah, and I think it's really about just the soul's ability to embody into the body and bring it into like the awareness and make sure you're using that in how you move and how you go about your choices throughout your day, essentially. Yeah.
Totally. So, keywords for Pluto: death and rebirth, transformation, um, other people's resources, power struggle, control.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it is evolutionary. Like, we need to go through these like dark night. Some people call it like the dark night of the soul. They
Mm-hmm.
feel like vampiric moment where
Mm-hmm.
you have to like really dance with your shadows. And what
Absolutely.
I really learned is like through Pluto transits is it's not about conquering a beast, it's about being able to dance with the beast, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And understand the power that that shadow kind of gives you, and your illumination of that shadow, I think is such a important point as well. And with Pluto, there's also kind of conversations around, toxicity and purification, as well as this kind of idea around morals and immorals and ethics, right? That kind of balancing act there of understanding how immoral your actions can be or how unethical your actions can be, and then really checking yourself and making sure that you're moving in a way that is empowering to you and in turn empowering to everybody else.
It feels like a lot of testing, I would imagine. Like the universe is kind of testing you and if and there's nothing wrong. Like everything in life is about learning experiences, right? So there's like no wrong moves. However, if you're not maybe choosing relationships or jobs or identities that are in alignment with how you're meant to hold power in this lifetime, or you're meant to find power within or empowerment, as you've said, it's going to kind of just keep repeatedly showing you that over a period of 16 years. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like by the time you get done with it, it's like in a video game, like the final battle, like you are
Mm-hmm.
that final boss. So I wrote, when Pluto transits your first house, it's often a signal of deep transformation of your sense of identity, personal power, and how you assert yourself in the world. It's a time for where you can confront buried emotions, fears, and desires. Pluto's influence can feel intense, so having remediation techniques can help you navigate these transformative energies. Now, before we get into any sort of remediation, which we will talk about a little bit, um, I want to ask you, when you have a client sitting in your chair, and maybe they're like an Aquarius rising, because
Mm-hmm.
the Aquarius risings are about to begin this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are some events that you can tell your client they might anticipate? What are some things to consider, think about? What are some themes that they're going to start to see? How would you what would you tell them to how to get ready, like
Mm-hmm.
prepare, you know?
Yeah, I think the thing is with Pluto and Aquarius in the first house for the Aquarius risings, I would prep them in a way that is really, because the difference between Pluto and Capricorn and Pluto and Aquarius is quite big, despite being in both like Saturnian signs and in traditional astrology. Because Capricorn is very much about like the the structure, what you do here, what you're here to do, like really understanding like your own power, your own authority, your own place in the world, that sort of stuff. But then we move to Aquarius, when Pluto's in Aquarius, this is where we learn a lot about our place in the broader society, what our goals are, who we want to affiliate with, who we not, how we allow ourselves to be seen so authentically for all the different hats that we wear and all the different parts of ourselves and all the different expressions of ourselves. So with Pluto and Aquarius, I think a lot of what it's going to be is for Aquarius risings is this kind of overwhelm with trying to really understand specifically who they are and what their role is for betterment of society. Because I think a lot of the time they're going to be bombarded with a lot of different opinions online, a lot of overwhelm of technology, overwhelm of kind of trying to keep up with that and trying to adapt. So I think Pluto in Capricorn is more about, at least from my understanding of my experience of it, has been like really about me owning more of my own kind of responsibility over myself, versus Aquarius Pluto in the first would be you're going to be more responsible for more of society and more people and more of your audience. So it's really about you making sure that you have an empowered sense of who you are when you go in these different rooms and who you talk to. So it's gonna probably be a lot of really kind of ability to for Pluto and Aquarius to kind of see how do I word this? Like they'll kind of see themselves in every single kind of social media post or group or whatever it may be, and it's about really how they are not giving their power away to that and how they're integrating that over time within themselves. I think is what I would anticipate. So, but it's about really breaking yourself apart, putting yourself back together, and Pluto and Aquarius is pretty good at that, but it can get a little fractaled in that regard because it has that Uranian kind of all over the place part of it too. So there's a little bit more mental overwhelm with Pluto and Aquarius risings, or Pluto Aquarius for Aquarius risings. So that's kind of what I would say. Just really being empowered, understanding that the breaking apart process and the kind of fractaling and all that allows you to put yourself back together. If you really choose to take that power back from whatever broke you. I think that's a lot of what I would anticipate for Aquarius, Pluto in the first.
I was thinking a little bit about having to face our own mortality a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes this is a physical manifestation, such as the need to get a surgery that can like really kind of bring up fears around our own mortality, fears around death, fears around our life and the purpose and the trajectory of our life. How many times do you like, you might have like, and I don't want to scare anyone, but like a medical issue kind of come up and it's like, oh, and saw the light and I realized I didn't have much time left and now I have to do X, Y, and Z. And so that's when everything changed. That feels very like Pluto in the first house. So whether it's mental surgery or physical surgery, there is sort of a wrestling match that we sort of have to do with our own mortality. Also, another theme with Pluto is what we are magnetically drawn to. That's not always good. That's not always a good thing. It's kind of like what we don't want to let go of out of our cold, dead hands. So we manipulate out of our Pluto, right? And it's not always a conscious thing. People hear the word manipulate, right? And that really kind of antsy about it, but we all have the ability to manipulate things. It's not always a conscious thing. Pluto makes it very conscious. It's going to put people into your life that are going to point this out to you, that are going to force you to like change those things. Another thing to really think about is extraction, like what really needs to sort of be cut out at the root that isn't benefiting you. And Pluto has a lot to do with our security needs. It's the resources that we get from other people. Sometimes this is financial, but sometimes this is also emotional, like supply, like the attention we're getting from somebody, right? Like, or the need, like Pluto brings up needs, right? Like Venus is our wants and desires, right? Like it's what we appreciate, but Pluto is like what we freaking need. You see me grabbing this glass right here, Pluto. Like I am not letting go of this. Like, so these are things to really reflect on through a 16-year visit. Like you're gonna have to release some ways that you manipulate. You're gonna have to release some ways that you seek security. You're gonna have to release parts of yourself that
You froze. I don't know if you want to repeat that last there.
it's okay. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So did you experience that on your journey? Like, did that come through relationships? Did that come through physical means? All of it? I guess.
Yeah.
it's a long transit, so why not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't know how much you want me to put my personal experiences in
You're
each
free to
moment.
share if you feel comfortable sharing
Yeah,
publicly. I want to say also, Brandon is a public speaker and he's a really wonderful person to work with. If you're, if your space, you work with a company doing the lecture circuit, but like you speak a lot about some of your darker experiences and how they really what they taught you about yourself. So I
yeah,
want to like leave the floor open if you do want to talk about your experiences today, or if
yeah.
you want to do it lightly. But um, yeah, you went through a pretty plutonic situation. If you want to share it with us.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple things I want to say before I get into any of that. First of all, thank you for your kind words about my speaking because it is very close to my heart, and it has been a huge way of me re-empowering myself, is being able to and re-identify myself too. And the thing about my journey with Pluto in my first house, one of the main things that happened actually early on in 2010, was I actually had to have a surgery, and it was a very intense surgery. And what was actually really interesting about it was it actually brought me back to when I was born. And so it was something that resurfaced around my birth about, whenever I was, however old I was at around 2010. And it was something that was extremely life or death. And it was very terrifying to face death in that regard and have to have, like, I had to have that surgery. And then what was interesting is that after that surgery, what ended up happening was I then had to change my entire diet, and then I was diagnosed with a very, like, I don't want to say light, but an autoimmune disease relative to digestion. Right, I was diagnosed at the time with Crohn's disease. So a lot of what I had to do was relearn how to relate to my body through some sort of crisis. So I want to bring that up for anyone to understand that there is a um, potentiality for that, but at the same time, it purifies that process. So because of that, I immediately had to cut out all toxic things. I stopped drinking. I stopped any sort of like recreational any any sort of toxic thing I was doing. I stopped eating really fatty foods immediately. I My body immediately needed me to do that. And that was something that was more on the physical regard in relation to the Pluto first house story, and it's obviously been something I've still had to go through. And what happened was I was able to get myself quickly into remission, and I've been in remission pretty much since 2012. And so it's been this immediate, like, kind of like, I need to do this. It's life or death. I have no other choice, kind of thing. So that's something in that regard that I think is very Pluto first house journey for me. As you were talking, I was like, yeah, I had to have emergency surgery. And it was really, really terrifying. And Pluto also rules like the bowels and kind of that sort of area. So that was like an intestinal thing. So it did also relate to that. So it is kind of relative to those things. And yeah, and so it was really intense in that regard. And then outside of that, after I had survived that sort of health scare around 2010, I really began kind of going further on my own empowerment journey of what I'm here to do, what I want. And I went online, and I had found a bunch of different spiritual people. This was 2010 at the time. So it was right after this had all happened. And I was searching for answers. And I had come across some spiritual leaders online who I thought were just amazing, and they knew how to spin a story. They knew how to say what needed to be said, and I began feeling like I belonged, and I feel like this was what I needed to do, and I chased it because I felt so empowered, and I felt like I felt so seen for a lot more depth from this person online. And after that, I ended up going and traveling with them and going all over the place with them and their community. And it was something that after a while, I began realizing that this wasn't really the truth of the situation or the truth of what this person may have been. And I had actually a very intense psychotic break after a realization of specifically that community and that leader being very unethical and very cult like. They are a cult, so it was very difficult for me to, huh?
disempowering.
Yes, extremely disempowering. It was extremely difficult for me. And I think for context, for those of you that may understand more about astrology, maybe more advanced, I have a lot of Pluto stuff within my 11th house, which is relative to groups and things of that nature. So the Pluto Aquarius kind of story feels like it also kind of connects to me in some way because of the natural correlations between Aquarius and 11th house. There may be some themes of that and themes of disempowering group dynamics as well. But what had happened is after that psychotic break, I had unfortunately fallen into jail and incarceration. And after that, what ended up happening in very Capricornian fashion, very Pluto Capricorn reclaiming your power fashion, what ended up happening shortly after I was released from incarceration, I was presented to essentially give this speech and tell this story to law enforcement, which is probably the most Pluto Capricorn kind of overlap with a lot of those words there. And so I have been doing that ever since, and it has been drastically healing within my own ability to reclaim my power and reclaim my identity and understand the power that my healing and my journey has been able to not only give me, but now that Pluto's moving into Aquarius, how much I can utilize my voice, my story to provide value for the collective, and provide value for so many other people that may be going through something like that. So it's been extremely empowering, but also extremely disempowering. And it was really about going through that process and understanding and not quitting, I think, is really a big part of it, because it's been very difficult, but it's also been extremely rewarding. And I'm just I can feel the graduation cap and the graduation gown being put on me. So it feels very, very great, after all these many years, and really finding more of myself, as difficult as that process may have been. So yeah, so it was a lot, and obviously I speak about it for a living. So eventually I will be speaking about it more online, which is very Pluto Aquarius of me as well once that ingress happens. So that will be happening inevitably. That will definitely be a part of my journey for sure as I gain more confidence in that. But yeah, it's definitely about purifying and really seeing yourself in darkness and in light, and being able to see that the darkness and going through those difficult times allowed you to be at the light, or at that capacity of light that you are after you go through that difficult time, right? You really go through and you really work on yourself, and then you become someone who can be that guiding light and be that guiding force. Pluto in the first wants you to do that. It wants you to be a guiding force of ethical and empowerment moves, because you've had to learn that through purifying it. So it's very beautiful, and I'm just very grateful to be able to get this opportunity to be able to talk about this from this perspective, because this in and of itself is so healing for me as well, just simply having this conversation. So I appreciate this opportunity, B, for allowing me to share that story in the little capacity that I felt like I wanted to in that regard, as I get ready for Pluto into my second Aquarius. But yeah, it's really a lot about, like I said, being able to really empower yourself and feel that you have something to give, and really, really dig deep and see what that really is, and then find ways to nurture that and build that through the darkness and the depth and the difficulty, and then bring it out and see how beautiful it can really be. Very, very Phoenix moment, very much that. Yeah.
Do you think that these transits can bring more vampiric people into your life? And like, what can someone do to really protect themselves from that? Or question,
Yeah.
ask?
Yeah, I think when it comes to this transit in regards to bringing vampiric people into you, I think from an evolutionary perspective, where Pluto's at, Pluto is on an axis, meaning that although you may have Pluto in your first house, and this goes the same for transits as well as natal charts. If you have Pluto in the first house, ultimately that Pluto is also trying to balance that polarity and go into the seventh. And so what that really turns out to is, yes, like you will likely bring toxic people into your life, or there will be vampiric energy, because essentially they're pushing you and they're showing you the darkness within you. They're kind of reflecting that back to you of what you could be, or what a part of you might be that's susceptible to that manipulation or that darkness or that lack of ethics and lack of morals. So absolutely, yes, I think just knowing how Pluto works and the axis, it's pretty common if you have Pluto in the first, or Pluto in the seventh too. Same sort of thing. It's going to kind of bounce that axis back and forth. I think with Pluto in the first, though, it's really about taking what's coming at you and realizing that there's a part of you that is that, and then honoring that part, but not necessarily doing that toxic behavior or toxic thing. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like we did a talk on Pluto through the seventh house, and we talked a little bit about that. Um, what has been like one thing that's helpful for you to shield? Like, first thing comes to mind is like working with stones like maybe smoky quartz or black tourmaline or onyx, like that are a little bit more protective. But I'm almost thinking like even just making a regular habit of spiritually cleansing. Like I love Art of the Root spiritual bath. They have an uncrossing bath, which is really great.
Mm-hmm.
You have Pluto transiting your first house. I would make that part of your regular routine. Full moon, couple nights, just sit in the tub with that and just like, however you choose to clear your energy, maybe read Psalm 23, like maybe, just I do I do not I do not give you clearance to my energy.
Yep.
you
Yeah.
know, like creating those boundaries.
Yeah. And I think the thing about it too is that for me, a lot of it is spiritual cleansing, and I guess a lot of it too is reminding yourself of your power. So sometimes with Pluto in the first, the energy or the visualization that comes to mind is quite extreme, obviously. And we see like a visualization of Pluto in the first where it might be this sense of like, for lack of a better word, like an exorcism or a really big release of this very dark energy that you weren't aware was there. And granted, yes, it can like to some degree manifest as that, because to me it did as well. And I think it was something that it ultimately allowed you to see how to have more light, you need to be aware of more darkness. And I think for me, black onyx was great. Hematite was great. Hematite was really great for me. That was one of the ones that really helped me. Um, Selenite actually really helped too. Like a lot of the just kind of like natural clearing crystals really helped. And just grounding exercises, grounding in who I am and reminding myself of my power. And you might find that Pluto in the first is going to test you to really stand up for yourself and assert those really strong boundaries of knowing that you won't give your power to a system or give your power to a person or a relationship or a goal or a group. There's so many different things that Pluto's going to kind of do. And I think the more you're ahead of the game in analyzing and aware of who you are, the better suited you'll be to be able to kind of combat these things and kind of see more of who you are and see what toxic areas there are for you. And I think the internet with Pluto and Aquarius is going to be huge. And I think for Aquarius risings, it's going to allow them to see so many different ways that unethical online things can be happening, but also how many things they can relate to and how much you can see yourself in those particular posts or whatever, and being able to see who you truly are, a lot of it. So
I think that that's wonderful advice. Let's get this PDF back on the screen for just a moment. So we talked a little bit about empowerment and radical acceptance of oneself and one's personality, purifying the body of toxins, developing a better relationship on the physical with the physical body. Is there anything else you just wanted to add on that in terms of tools?
in terms of tools, I think for specifically Aquarius risings, I think the because it is an air sign and it is this kind of like group dynamic sign here and technology, I think a lot of it would be understanding your like malware kind of protection, like protecting your devices, protecting your identity of what you sent out there. And you might see with Pluto and Aquarius, just as an overall, not necessarily for Aquarius risings, but you might see their really dark images of themselves being put out through some way of someone trying to abuse that or whatever, which is essentially like revenge, revenge. I don't know if I could say it on here, but anywho, um, so that may happen, but it's about really purifying your relationship with what you put online. I think is more of what I would recommend for Pluto with the toxins with that and how much of yourself you put online. That's really what I would say for that specifically with the Aquarius part of it. But yeah, I think toxin purification, doing gut cleanses, Doing colon cleanses would also be really good for Pluto in the first. Doing some type of deep energetic clearing, even somatic therapy can be really helpful. Anything that's kind of connected to your body. Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah. So the transformative box wrote cognitive behavioral tools, distress tolerance tools, polyvagal nerve tool, like so your nervous system. Uh,
Hmm.
really looking into these things can be very helpful because these are physically some of the tools to put in your toolbox during this time. Internal family systems therapy. This is
Hmm.
another really great if you find yourself struggling with a lot of like guilt or anger issues, that might be for you. It's very helpful for people who struggle with like borderline personality disorder
Mm.
as well. It's one of the most effective therapies for that. And then
Hmm.
also neurolinguistic processing can be really helpful for people. So these are just some tools to really help you kind of um, create new neural pathways in your brain. And again, Aquarius is a nervous system, right? So like these are helpful for your nervous system, these
Yep.
tools.
Yep. A couple more I want to add to that I think would be really plutonic are obviously massage or specifically like lymphatic drainage.
Mm,
Those are both really good for just connecting to to the specific body, as well as obviously like deep tissue massage because of the fact that it's very deep and it goes really kind of intensely into that. You want to the more you lean into the transformation that Pluto wants, and the more you kind of allow your body to purify and lean into purification therapies and kind of all the things that we've kind of listed up here, um, as well as anything that you've found that kind of works for you. Really figure out what that is and lean into the plutonic depth that it wants you to go to, because you'll probably have a lot of insights into who you are through that process of using these different tools.
yeah, I definitely see that. Shadow work and developing a rich inner dialogue. Pluto is about bringing the unconscious to the surface. So, journaling, especially stream of consciousness writing, can help you really confront parts of yourself that you normally avoid. You could also use internal family systems, as we talked about on the previous slide, therapy to speak to your parts. So, internal family systems therapy is a really loving kind of therapy where it teaches you that different parts of ourselves are created as a response to trauma. So we have things that they call like firefighters, and a firefighter's job is to literally put out the fires. So like the distress that you're feeling, right? So people that for some people that might be like, I don't know, maybe the bad behavior is like punching a wall, or maybe, that's um drinking alcohol, but these are like behaviors that are developed to fight the fire, literally. So it's like learning what the different parts are and kind of leading with love. So maybe just like if that therapy kind of like resonates with you, if you're learning to develop more self-love and self-understanding, like journaling to those parts, journaling about hidden motivations or fears, can also help you. I mean, Pluto kind of puts us into relationship with our fears. Um, and so I think that that's something also to just consider is like this transit's going to kind of make you have to face your fears. So having some tools in the toolbox really helpful. Having a safe place to just unload, I think, is really helpful. So even if that's therapy, whether that's a journal, it's good to have these things in alignment for those moments.
Yeah. One of the things I want to kind of say on that I think is very Pluto Aquarius, and we kind of briefly talked about this actually prior to recording, as I think that we'll see a lot more people using, and I've even used it myself, of using chat GPT or different AI models to help with verbal processing. What's really funny is I didn't tell you this, Bea, but actually one of the things I actually did a couple of days ago was quite literally that internal family systems therapy with specifically chat GPT, and learned that process. So I can imagine that may be something that may happen for Aquarius risings, um,
Yeah.
as well as potentially on the other end of it, an overwhelming fear maybe of losing their losing or gaining an entirely new direction in life because of AI's integration into their career or into their goals. So I think there's a lot there as well where they could be really fearful of getting replaced by AI and therefore needing to adapt, or versus in utilizing AI to increase their ability to do more in the world. It can be either way, really. With that, I think that's the other part I want to bring up there too.
Aquarius risings are here to learn friendship and community.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a big thing that I have been seeing a lot in my practice lately has been that the definition of friendship functions differently for some versus others, especially with the nodes of fate right now being in Aries and Libra. So I think it's been a common occurrence that I have been seeing recently that a lot of my Aquarius rising folks have recently had to either end friendships or been forced to end friendships from the other side because, you know, the pandemic made it much more clear how we're showing up for people. And I think a lot of people have this definition of what a friend is that's really rooted more in acquaintanceship than friendship. And so people, especially neurodivergent people who have more needs in relationship with others, their impatience to deal with that aloof Aquarius kind of energy
Yeah.
has really kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, I think, or they've taken it personally. So I've been noticing a lot of like Aquarian clients starting to kind of come in and they're like, I don't, you know, the pandemic killed all my friendships. Maybe I need to learn how to become a better friend and learn how to like
Mm.
speak to people and reach out for help. So I can't help but wonder like if chat GPT would be helpful in those situations. Like you have a friend who's struggling, maybe you don't know what to say, so you don't say anything. Well, now you can go into chat GPT and be like, my friend is really struggling with blah, 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 blah. How do I begin a conversation that's really kind with them? You know, things like
Mhm.
that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's so much there. I think with Aquarius risings, a lot of their, like you said, their journey is really about friendship. And I think with Pluto and Aquarius, and you kind of hit it on the head too with a lot of what happened during the pandemic was a lot of isolation and a lot of limiting of people's social interactions. And I think Pluto and Aquarius is organically, outside of it being in the first house for Aquarius risings, is going to organically completely transform how we communicate with each other. And I think Aquarius risings are going to be the ones that are really going to be pioneering for what authentic connection still is or could be. I think that's the thing about Aquarius is they have that connection between both the past and the future. And I think that's what we're going to kind of see with Pluto and Aquarius for Aquarius risings is how they are pioneering and navigating the social difficulties that technology and AI is going to potentially create for them and their social interactions and their things. So like I said, maybe they lose their job to AI or they want to pioneer an entire different thing. They become the pioneers for that. They become the voice for that and that new way of interacting and saying, no, we can't all talk to ChatGPT all day. We can't all be on our phones all day. This is what we need for authentic kind of connections. So I think that's something we could expect for Pluto and Aquarius overall, but also Pluto and Aquarius in the first.
I like that. I was just thinking as you were talking, there's a Noah Cyrus song that's
Mhm.
it's super silly. It's called I Got So High That This. And there's I want to find it. What does she say? Okay, she says, I got so high that I saw Jesus. He said it's all gonna be okay. You just need me in your heart, Tennessee whiskey and love. I got so high that I saw Jesus. Yeah, Joseph lost his job to a machine, and Mary lost her mind to lines of code. You can't see it, but if the angels are the AI, then I'm gonna burn this whole thing down.
Wow, that's like really, really on the nose, appropriate.
Noah Cyrus, you are a genius.
Yeah, that's very yeah, it's very polarizing. And I think that's what we'll see with Pluto and Aquarius. I wonder if she has Aquarius rising or heavy Aquarius.
She's also an Aquarius moon.
Ah, like you and I. Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
There's a very poignant cover of her and Miley singing that during COVID in the backyard sessions together. I love
Yeah,
it. I got
that's
high.
very
I
appropriate.
saw Jesus.
Yeah, and and that's the other thing. I think there's so much, and this is also partially because Pluto and Aquarius is happening with an Ingrid or with Saturn and Pisces, but I think there's also that other aspect to it too, because Pluto and Aquarius is in traditional ruled by Saturn, and because of that, you're going to want to look to see what Saturn's doing in the chart to see how Pluto's going to really kind of work with things. So I think a lot of this we'll see more when Saturn goes into Aries, and especially when Saturn goes into Taurus and starts squaring that Pluto. But we're getting way advanced concepts in this regard, but just kind of having fun astrology conversations here. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so transformative body practices. We did kind of touch on this a little bit, but because it affects the outward appearance in the body, this is like a really great time to just overall like redefine yourself. So if there's like a way that you've always wanted to look, but you've always, I don't know, had a job and you're like, I can't dye my hair pink or get a nose ring or something. This is like the time to really embody exactly who you are. But also, again, you were talking about like lymphatic massage or lymphatic drainage and massage. Sorry. Those are both all really great bodily practices, but somatic experiencing, as we talked about a little bit earlier, that's also very helpful too.
Yep. Absolutely. I think so much of it is really about um, really making sure that you're releasing all of that toxicity in whatever way resonates with you.
Yeah. So the power of release, Pluto demands release and letting go of what no longer serves you. Engage in decluttering your home, your wardrobe, or symbolically letting go of old versions of yourself on a deeper level. Practice forgiveness, not just for others, but also for yourself, and acknowledge mistakes and regrets. Don't dwell in them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think, as I kind of said in my story earlier, a lot of my journey with Pluto in the first has been reclaiming that power that I thought, or reclaiming what I thought was toxic or what I thought was a terrible experience within my life, and being able to turn it around into an empowering tool for myself and so many others as well.
Love that. Also, we can talk about working with Pluto or working with Hades in a magical sense. I find working with whatever planet is in charge or I'm going through transits with is really helpful. You develop like a funny little dialogue the more you work with planets. So maybe even making an altar for Pluto or Hades. I always make the joke that when we're working with Pluto, we want to prepare like Pantera's coming over. Pluto loves whiskey. He loves Southern comfort. He loves chocolate cake. He loves things that are decadent. He's here to party. He's a good time gal. Maybe don't call Pluto a gal. But creating an altar for him, a space in your day to really like honor him and maybe writing a letter to him and just being like, I know you're here to transform things. These are the things that I want you to transform. So offerings, what do we put here? Whiskey, chocolate cake, red wine, diamonds, because diamonds where are they from? They're from underground. Dirt. Where's dirt from? Underground. So be creative. Think about things that are connected to the ground and underground. You might appreciate finding healers during this time. So shaman work could be really helpful. Death and rebirth rituals. And also ancestral work and figuring out like if we're getting to the root of our issues, that's going to mean we're going to have to take a really hard look at where they're developed. So calling in the ancestors, looking at the behavior of the ancestors, that was a really hard thing that I had to do during some Pluto transits. My dad was a butcher by trade, and I realized like I come from this culture of death, right? And that was like a really big realization where it's like we wonder why we have the karma that we do as a family. We are active participants in death. And we don't talk about that, so having to look at some hard things and maybe transforming things at the ancestral roots can also be helpful.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really about um, being brave to go into that darkness. I think is a lot about this here. Yeah.
Well, that looks like the last slide.
Yeah.
Um, Is there anything else you want to add in terms of remediation or tools or shadow work?
I think, and I've kind of like, I'm just going to kind of reiterate it. I think a lot of what I would give advice to for Aquarius Risings for Pluto in the first is just really dive into this and don't be scared of yourself because you're with yourself your entire life. And Pluto is going to want you, especially as it goes through your first house. And also, of course, if it hits anything in your chart, whether it's by obviously conjunction is going to be probably the strongest in the first, but try and square anything like that if you have any of those, or if you don't know what those are, obviously that's what you're here for, to learn all these different things. So feel free to reach out to B for those things. But I think it's really about being brave and really diving in and understanding that there's so much value inside of you that's hidden that you don't see yet. And I think when you run into those triggers, run into those traumas and really own them and own the male adaptive behaviors, really own them and try and understand them and really come to terms with why they're coming up and why that part of you is coming up and address it, you'll be perfectly fine. It's going to be heavy, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be transformative, and you'll guarantee will not be the same person after all this transit. But if you do the work and you really dive into it and don't be scared, understand that fear is something that our brains are literally trained to run from. But if you understand that, once again, your body is yours, your soul is yours, it's always going to be there, and you choose how much you want to come to terms with that and connect with that. And Pluto is going to force you to connect to that really, really deeply. So just dive in and stay strong and stay consistent and give yourself a good pat on the back and really just allow yourself to be more humble with yourself and take care of yourself, please. Like, just be soft with yourself, because trauma is not an easy process, and and neither is healing. And I wish I would have told that to myself when all this stuff was happening. But I know that I always knew there was a bigger reason for it. And now that Pluto's moving into Aquarius, I see a lot more of it. So, I promise you it will be better. Just don't give into the fear too much. Understand it's necessary to help you get better. So,
I like that. I also think with Pluto being in Aquarius, Aquarius is an air sign. So it's all about ideas and innovation and the thoughts that we have, and it's driven by connectivity, right?
yeah.
Um, Look for ways things are connected within you,
Mhm.
psychologically,
Mhm.
belief systems,
Mhm.
and don't be afraid to challenge those things. Pluto transits are really great for challenging you to learn things in a new way. So if there's things that you've learned about that are like super traditional, well, why are they traditional? Like, who benefits? Who benefits is a good question to consider.
Yeah.
And does it benefit you? Or
Yeah.
does it benefit the most marginalized members of society to continue this behavior? Question your ideas, question your thoughts,
Yeah.
be open, be flexible to having new ideas. And another thing to really think about too is like thinking about how you connect with people, like
Mhm.
relearn that process. Some of us need to relearn that process. Some
Yeah.
of us move out of our shadow and we wonder why the relationships that we have are so, are problematic. Or we get into the arguments that we do with people. Um,
Yeah.
Relationships work best when you have things outside of the relationships. And that's something Aquarius risings don't always, they can get tunnel vision a lot of times. So find things that bring you back to yourself, that bring you back to who you are individually, away from those relationships. Aquarius is all about independence. If you're codependent and you're constantly in relationship with other people, you're never going to see the beauty of who you are as an individual being, because you're always
Mhm.
going to be connected to this other thing. And I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm an Aquarius stellium person, but like I think that we shine in beauty when we allow others to be exactly who they are. That's another thing I really want to say too is you got to leave room for others to be exactly who they are. If you want others to respect who you are fundamentally, you gotta dish that respect out. So Aquarius energy can often is a fixed sign, so it often wants to control things, but then wants freedom for itself, right? So you got to be able to give and take and leave room for other people to also be who they're meant to be. You can't change people. You have to just support who they are or don't.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think it's so important. And I think it's going to be so beautiful to see how Aquarius Risings deal with this. And there's so much empowerment that we're really trying to get across for you guys. And I think it's just something that you're going to be on a big wavelength of those things of empowerment, disempowerment for a bunch of different directions. But ultimately, like you'll be very powerful when this transit is over, and and your power will be tested in ways that you didn't know you could go that deep. You didn't know you could go that far. And that's where you're really going to realize how much more power you had, how much light you had through going through that darkness, which I really, really love. So I love this. This is such a good conversation, B.
Well, thank you for sharing your personal story. You had something you wanted to read. You didn't have an opportunity to read it.
Hey.
Can I read it and in our closing out tonight?
Yeah, I'll read it right now. So what it is this is Robert Hand's Planet in Transit. It's a very common book
Great.
for many astrologers. So it is. It's a classic. And I just wanted to read what it says for Pluto in the first house. It kind of says everything that we've kind of already said here today, but I think it's still relevant to see what Robert Hand said about this. So I'm just going to read this just for context, about 4 paragraphs. So just
An offering to the ones that came before us.
yes, 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 yes. So at this time, you will gradually reshape many aspects of your personality, and you will have the opportunity to get in touch with the forces that have shaped you and made you what you are. Getting in touch with yourself in this manner is especially helpful because it gives you greater control over the unconscious drives that in the past have surfaced in subconsciously directed urges, compulsions, and irrational impulses. You will also gain greater control over the ways in which you protect your personality to others, which will make your relationships more rewarding. However, en route to this desirable goal of self improvement, you will have to meet certain challenges in order to make anything good come out of this period. First, you will find energies rising within you that want to control everything and everyone around, which could make relationships with others exceedingly difficult if you are not careful. Now, you have the chance to be either a positive or a negative force for change in the world around you, but you will almost certainly be a negative force if you don't make the effort to understand yourself. You will be the vehicle for blind and irrational ego forces, the result of infantile and primitive urges that you haven't dealt with as an adult. These forces are not directed toward what is best for you. But if you understand yourself well, you will be able to bring about a complete rebirth of energy and effectiveness in your life. Fortunately, under the influence of this transit, you will be more and more driven to seek out the inner dimensions of life. You will be attracted to the mysterious and hidden aspects of life, which will make you very interested in your own and other people's inner workings. The same interest may lead into the study of things like astrology, yoga, and other occult or spiritual doctrines whose purpose is the total regeneration of the self.
That.
Yes. And
thank you, Robert Hand.
thanks, Robert Hand. Yeah, it's such a great book to read as you kind of go through these things. It kind of helps you get some perspective. And the thing about Pluto in the first house, it's going to be such a long transit, and you're going to see kind of themes of that throughout it. And I think there's so much power that it has, and I think Robert Hand put it really well in all of that too. And so obviously, you're probably trying to learn about astrology too, considering that's what Pluto wants. It wants more depth. So obviously, you're in the right place. So with any of these other practices, so yeah.
The more you resist change, the more it's going to capture you and enslave you. So
Absolutely.
go, guys. Thank you so much for being here, Brendan. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So my website is bramstrology.com. So bramstrology.com. It's the same on Instagram and TikTok and things like that. So you can find me on any of those socials there. And yeah, I've been doing a lot of readings within the Chicagoland area. So if you're in the Chicagoland area, that is where you can find me the easiest. Otherwise, I obviously do online stuff, videos on my YouTube channel. I'm currently working through my very large series of every planet, Sun through Saturn, in every sign and house. So I just finished Libra week, and so we're starting Scorpio week this week. So that's going to be really fun to see how those go out. So yeah, so working on that too on my YouTube channel, which is once again Bramstrology. So yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me, what you can do. And obviously I have other stuff on here that we've done. So you can look through the coven and see what other videos I've done here that you're welcome to if you like my reading style and like my speaking style. So yeah, and of course, thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome. And we'll have Brenda back soon, I'm sure. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I hope that this is an easy transit for you, or at least an inventive one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.